And that's what dirty cereal is. Just Dan Callis. You're listening to the Beat Motel podcast, and we need to warn you that we like to use words like fuck, shit, and syndicalus, boxy scrotux, angry flap, and foot biscuits. And we don't often bleep those words out, apart from because we're not complete animals. But if you understand that and you like music, then listen on. It's hot here, and that might not have any context if you're listening back to this, but fuck me, it's hot. So this is Beat Motel, and we complain about the weather, but we're also a music podcast, and I'm here again with Mr. David Jago. How are you?
Salut.
Hey, salut. Oh, very fancy. Is that in honour of the Paris Olympics happening at the moment?
I haven't really been watching it.
Well, that was a conversation killer then, wasn't it?
No, I watched some, but I just sport for me is just a bit of a non-starter. I mean, like, I quite like darts because there's a bit of theatrics, like the guy that threw the bats into the crowd or something. And I quite like ice hockey because it's all nice and floaty, and it's almost like ballet or something. It's all nice and they're floating along, and then they'll just stop and start knocking the shit out of each other. I think that's my favourite, ice hockey. It's brilliant. But everything else, I've just got no interest in at all.
So unless they're floating or walloping each other, they can fuck off.
Boxing's good. I like boxing. There's a real art to boxing. I think it's quite beautiful.
I think that's what the Marvel films are lacking, because they're assumed that it's just about the punching, but no, the boxing's a bit more. Anyone who thinks boxing's a complete yobbo thing, I always like to point out Woodhouse was an expert, a champion boxer. So if you like Woodhouse and have him down as your mark of what's classy and whatever, then.
And Morrissey as well. He liked boxing, didn't he? He was a boxer.
I imagine there's a lot of people who'd like to punch Morrissey, but the idea is.
No, he's a proper boxer, isn't he?
He really is he?
He's a real boxer, yeah.
Dear me, we had Dave Mustaine's, a few episodes ago, we had Dave Mustaine and his hands that are registered as lethal weapons. And now we've got Morrissey being a rumbler. I don't know anything about boxing. Is that what they call them?
Rumble in the jungle.
Rumble. What would the Morrissey equivalent of Rumble in the Jungle be? Mumble in the...
Co-op.
Mumble in the co-op.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Mumble in the co-op.
Right. With that, let's go for your riff of the week, because it is a riff and a half. Just that was Morrissey with Mumble in the Co-op. Who was that?
Ennio Morricone with Trio, which is from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's like, I was thinking of a riff, and I just thought, right, riffs, and then I was like, oh, what about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? I don't know why that came to me. I just thought there's too many guitars and things like that. I want something a bit different, and that's like that's one of my favourites. It is my favourite films of all time, and the soundtrack is just phenomenal. I love it.
It's a hell of a piece of work.
If it's riff, but I love it. So there it is.
What amazed me, I looked up what year this was, 1966, and that, just the sheer quality of the recordings, remarkable. So 66, people could talk about Sgt. Pepper and whatever being remarkable, how they managed to fit so many instruments on a 4-track recording. I can't imagine Ennio Morricone had anything other than that. So just the quality of it. I got given one of his other albums, a few dollars more, or a fistful of dollars.
Yeah.
And just the music's incredible, and it's amazing. It's amazing the influence of Morricone. So just to pick a few, I can say, well, probably Portishead and a lot of the sort of hip hop thing, anything that's got that kind of vibe. But most surprisingly, I was watching some documentary, and there's a clue about today's topic, about the recording and the writing of Blue Monday by New Order. And the bass line is a rip-off of an Ennio Morricone bit. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not going to sing the whole thing.
Well, it's interesting when you listen to him, and also Lalo Schifrin as well. I was listening to some Lalo Schifrin earlier, and every now and then you get a bit, and you're like, oh, wow, that's they're like a Portishead sample, or
Mm.
NWA and Wu-Tang, and it's a massive attack. It's just in everything. It's just that I think he was such a game changer, but sort of covert. You know, he did it without sort of needing the praise. I think he just did it. Amazing. Those guys are incredible. You know.
So this is, I don't really know much about the period in filmmaking, but is it right that spaghetti westerns? Oh my god, they're Italian. I've literally just got why they're called spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
I am nearly 50 years old, and I never quigged that until that absolute second. Anyone watching YouTube will see the moment I suddenly made those two connections in my head.
You made the connection. Yeah, I mean those Sierra, I forgot his name. The filmmaker, I forgot his name. I blurted it out like Biden, so I made a mistake as well. So it's all right.
Trump.
It's not Sierra Leone, is it? That's a place. God, I'm under pressure. But yeah, his trilogy, the I call it. They sometimes call it like the Man with No Name trilogy. They're just brilliant, amazing films. And,
absolutely, just the space in them, and
yeah, they're not connected either. They're not. They're completely separate stories, but brilliant. You know, amazing.
Right, so I'm going to play my riff of the week, but it's not that good. I've got this weird thing where I'll explain it. I'll play it, then I'll explain it. Do you want to have a guess?
Fear Factory. I don't know.
I was surprised. Saw Fear Factory play it. I don't know. They popped up on some YouTube thing. I was really surprised how they looked. I don't know why, but they looked really geeky, and I've never really thought about what they looked like.
Was that a recent?
Yeah, no, super recent.
It's only the guitarist left, isn't it, of the original lineup? Dino thingy.
Not a Dino from. We talked about him last week. Dino from Press Gang, who went on to direct Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh yeah, he had an American accent in that, didn't he?
Right. That was The Ruins of Beverast with Exuvia. And the reason I sort of mumble and slightly grumble about it, trying to find a 30-second clip from a track that's about 17 minutes long is really difficult. But I chose this because it's black metal, technically. And the world of black metal I find endlessly fascinating because that pounding drums, that just sort of quite hypnotic, and yeah, it is kind of heavy, but then you got the operatic voice coming in very, very faintly in the background, which really took me by surprise because normally operatic vocals in metal sound fucking horrible, whereas that actually, I just thought it was quite nice that it was just another texture coming in. But I only found out about them a couple of days ago, so I've got nothing else to say. So shall we move on to...
But sometimes bands do kind of deviate quite a lot, like Morbid Angel, a proper sort of death metal band. And I think they did some stuff that was really kind of melodic and you just wouldn't have expected them to do.
I've seen them like possibly 3 times.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic.
But not as Morbid Angel, as I Am Morbid, which is essentially the bassist stroke singer and a couple of really, really good guitarists. The drummer might be from Morbid Angel as well. But great. I couldn't pinpoint any of their songs, but live, they're great to see at a festival.
Yeah.
Right. So what's the theme this week? Because it is beautifully and very tastefully linked to our theme from last week.
Oh, God, hang on. My computer's doing something weird. Documentaries. Weather. Sorry, that's the most underwhelming way of introducing it. No, because there's a weather alert just issued, and I floated over it and thought, what's going on here? Which I should have just been concentrating on what we're doing instead. I thought there might be an apocalypse coming or something.
It's not one of those yellow warnings.
Tonight, we're going to be doing documentaries. Rockumentaries, if you will.
See, no, I put the title as Best and Worst Band Documentaries, because we did Best and Worst biopics last week.
Right.
And documentary is, what's the difference?
I don't know. It's just a stupid thing they say in Spinal Tap, isn't it?
Right. Let's play the first choice. This is your first choice for something to hang your hat on for Best and Worst Documentaries. What was that?
Some Kind of Monster.
By who's it by?
That's Metallica, of course, and it's I don't know if I've chosen documentaries that I found the ones that I've gone for are ones that I found interesting and about a kind of a story, a kind of relationships within the band. I guess that's kind of the thing I've gone for, and that track, I think the timestamp that I sent you was like 7 minutes or something like that.
7:35. Yeah.
Yeah, and the song's 8.5 minutes long. And
Does it take that long to get good?
Well, no, it pretty much just does what happens. I mean, that 15 seconds feels like a long time, and it's 8.5 minutes long.
Do you know what? I'm going to shock anyone who's been listening to this for a while. That is the first Metallica I've ever heard where I thought, yes, this rocks. Until you get that club singing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the production. People complain about the production and the biscuit tin snare. I don't think that's the problem. Yeah, I don't think that's the problem. I quite like the sound, but each song has got sort of 2 or 3 ideas, and then they just repeat them again and again and again and again and again. And it's like it might be good if they were all sort of 2 minutes each, but 8.5 minutes, and it's like. Yeah, I was looking at sort of other songs, but Paranoid Android's 6:27. You know what I mean? Bohemian Rhapsody 5:55, and it's like the amount of stuff that happens in those songs, like rock operas. Do you know what I mean? They just go everywhere, and Metallica have got the nerve to do an 8.5 minute song that does nothing, and there's not a key change in it. There's not a tempo change in it. There's nothing that happens at all, and the whole album. There's bits on the album that are kind of interesting, Saint Anger, but I think of it as a soundtrack to this documentary, actually, because this documentary is about a period where I remember when I don't know if you've seen it, it's called Some Kind of Monster, 2004, and I remember seeing it and thinking, oh my God, Metallica are washed up and they're done. They've had it. They were early 40s, but it felt like they were just old, knackered, and it was like the end of the line, you know. And they're sort of in the early 40s and just seemed like they were done, really. And you're sort of watching them try and create something it's not like they're hungry to create this masterpiece. They're sort of hungry to be hungry. So it's almost like they're trying to come out with something that they can promote. The bass player had left, and it just feels like the band's falling apart before your eyes.
I think I have seen it.
And it's interesting. You know, it's an interesting thing to watch, actually.
I think I've seen it. Is it the one where Bob Rock is sort of standing in on bass?
Yeah, he's on bass, yeah.
And yeah, I have seen it. And I remember it being a torturous, like 3 hours long or something.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's loads of bits where nothing's happening. A lot is going on the whole way through, but a lot of it just seemed complete wank.
Yeah.
And completely irrelevant to anything.
So like, it just feels like they're so rich by that point. They're so kind of famous by that point that they're completely out of touch. You know, you can sort of imagine when they were younger, but prior to that, they would just do an album, go on tour, do an album, go on tour. And it seems like they sort of had their heads together and had sort of had their feet on the ground. And now it's like the first time they'd stopped, and they're talking about their feelings, and they've got this shrink who I'm sure is sort of a charlatan and just trying to stitch them up and just take it. I think he was on ridiculous amounts of money to be the shrink. And so it's all this sort of pop psychology being thrown at them. And it's really embarrassing. Like it sort of makes you feel really uncomfortable to watch them do it. And it's amazing that they allowed it to be seen, really. I'm quite impressed that they just went, we'll just show it anyway.
A God complex, perhaps. So as you're a psychotherapist, is it that aspect of it that you haven't told us whether you're putting this in the best category or the worst?
I haven't chosen those categories, really. I think I've just chosen ones that I like or that I find interesting. That's kind of what I've gone with. So,
the biggest impact of Some Kind of Monster for me was a real strong feeling by the end of it that I didn't want to see it again.
Yeah, I watched it loads of times because I remember there was a VHS in the 90s of, I don't know if you've seen, A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica, it's called. And you've got 2 VHSs. You've got one where they're making the Black Album, which is brilliant. Just so interesting to watch the whole process happening. No psychobabble in that at all. They're just getting on with it, doing the job. And then the second VHS is them going on the Black Album tour. So you've got this really extreme kind of making this massive, biggest rock out, one of the biggest rock albums of all time, and then going on this huge, extensive tour. That's really interesting. And it's lighter, I guess. Whereas this is just that they've just fallen apart. And there's rules as well to the music they're making, which it's like they're trying to sort of do new metal, but they're doing it in 2004. There's a bit where Kirk Hammett starts playing a guitar solo, and they go, "Oh, Kirk, we have to have a word with you. You have to come in here." And they sit him down. They say, "Well, you know, we've talked about solos and that being something maybe we're not going to do anymore." And they're really skirting around it, so they sort of tell him off for playing a solo, and it's just awful. It's just they're just so off the mark. But there's bits of the album. There's some of the stuff that they come out with, which I think is kind of interesting because they're doing something new, they're doing something different, which I think post Saint Anger they haven't done. Like the last 20 years, they've just tried to sound like classic Metallica, and that's all they've really done. And I've always given it a chance, and then just gone. They're just going through the motions of Metallica. Whereas prior to that, every album was something new. Every album was a step forward, and they took some risks. You know, they did some melodic stuff, load and reload. Really pissed off loads of metalheads, which was brilliant. You know, it really annoyed loads of metalheads. So they always did that, and then now it's like they're just playing the game for the last 20 years, really.
But I would say, how far can you go? We can go anywhere you want. You're Metallica. Yeah. So are they being too conservative with their sound? Are they not?
Well, I liked it when they did the Lou Reed one. I mean, it was nonsense. But it was like, we're going to do an album with Lou Reed, and it's going to be completely ridiculous, and everyone's going to go, "What a load of shit!" And I love that. I kind of like it if they just went a bit mad now and just did loads of weird stuff,
or went a bit like Scott
Walker, yeah, or just collaborated with people like you wouldn't expect, like that, because that was interesting. I thought, you know, remember that being on Jules Holland. It's like Lou Reed just going, sort of singing out of key, and Metallica behind them thrashing away. I was like, "This is brilliant. This is so strange."
They were still just doing Metallica instrument.
Basically, yeah. They're basically doing the same thing. Yeah, but I mean, Load and Reload were interesting because they actually touched on sort of country music and things like that, and that was really quite a step away from what
then they changed them. They looked at the record sales and went, "Nah, let's go back to doing Metallica."
Well, they kind of tried to jump on the new metal bandwagon too late, I think, in a sense. They sort of tried to sound like Korn and tried to have all these issues about, you know, I think James Hetfield gets annoyed that there's a pencil or something. He wants a pen. He's like, "Oh, well, I've got a pencil. I need a pen." And just it's like little sort of first world problems that they've got around them because they're so rich, and that part of it I find is quite entertaining. Really,
I'm not a fan of Korn. I mean, probably nothing about them. Sort of, I don't know. I just don't get that kind of thing. But I've read up or watched a documentary about the recording of that first album, the toll it took on the singer, and it's fucking brutal.
Oh, you can hear it. No, you can hear it.
I mean, like shocking. Like the people who were involved in it should be fucking ashamed of themselves.
You can hear in the first Korn album him have a breakdown at the end, and I recognise that personally as a breakdown. I understand that to be a breakdown.
It wasn't acted.
I can feel it. Do you know what I mean? I can feel from personal experience that is him in a very particular state.
There's something being rumbled around outside here. Is that what you can hear?
Yeah, that's
it's not your bowels or anything. It's a pallet truck outside the window. And I've got to go because it's hot. Right, let's go complete other end of the musical scale with this. Do you want to have a guess? I think you might be surprised by this one, actually.
Blur.
Now, did you know? Did you just know that's Blur? Or was
it Oily Water?
Yes, fucking hell. Okay.
I always really liked that song. I always really liked that. That's a good tune. Yeah.
I was sort of looking back at why I liked it when it came out, and it's the noisy element of it. You've got some on that. So this is from Modern Life is Rubbish, the second Blur album. So first Blur album, by their own admission, was just indie. They just made an indie album. They said at the time to get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Fulfill their contractual obligation.
Sings a great tune.
Oh, I think the album's still fun. It's God, just because the band kind of turns their nose up at it doesn't mean that I'm not going to like it anymore. But this big dog. Sorry, on the video you can see a big dog just come in.
Oh, come on, look, go on. I gave him a pig's ear, and I thought that would be enough to keep him occupied. Go on.
What? You gave the dog a Twix?
Go on. Right, stay there. Oh my word!
Yeah,
I gave him a pig's ear.
Oh right,
which is pretty ghastly, considering I haven't eaten a pig since the
30 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, this album, it definitely had some pop on it. It had some quite silliness, and I was going to choose something like Sunday Sunday, or one of the songs that really sort of hinted at where they're going to go with Park Life and whatever. But I chose this one just because Graham Coxon, it's just got this brilliant howling sort of Sonic Youth guitar just running through the back of it, and that was the last 30 seconds of the song. But the song basically does that for about 3 minutes before the end.
I used to really particularly love that tune, actually. And I think it's because, like you say, it hints at what's to come, because 13 was always my favourite. That was always my favourite Blur album. And it sort of hints at that type of dynamic, I think, where Graham Coxon's just going off on one. It's great.
So the documentary was called Star Shaped. And you mentioned VHS tapes earlier. This was back when you had to go to Andy's Records or HMV and buy a VHS tape, because it sure as hell wasn't going to be on TV. And in the early 90s, the VHS tapes were a really interesting thing, because labels would sign a band, obviously put out an album, but they'd also quite often put out a VHS tape. And I can remember my first exposure to REM was a VHS tape that a friend's older sister had called Singles. And REM, probably quite interestingly for the 80s, made a video for each of their songs. And I can remember being absolutely fascinated by that. But Star Shaped, I don't know how it came about. Being skeptical, I think the second album came out, bombed commercially, and Food, who are a subsidiary of EMI, looked around at what they had in the can, as it were. What they had, other material, and just sort of shoved out this video, this sort of hastily edited video.
I remember it. I'm pretty sure I remember it, because there's footage of them on the road and stuff like that, isn't there? It's sort of, but like just they're following them around and stuff like that.
It was, I guess, because they signed to a major. They had a film crew, or probably a small camera, like following them around for the first couple of albums. So I'd like to see it again, because some of the sort of on the road stuff is absolutely what cemented my horrible addiction to being a musician.
Yeah,
because it was a lot of the footage was Blur not doing well. It's them at a service station, and like Damon's like, "How does it feel to be in Blur this year?" No one answers. They'll just sort of stare at their knees. But we were like, "That's so cool."
Yeah. Oh, there's one of Graham Coxon drunk on a bus singing a song or something. Is that in there?
There's I really want to see it again, because there's so much.
Well, since I've seen it,
there's, I think, several bits of footage of Damon throwing up, which we saw in real life at Colchester University once. But it was just like the shittiness of being on tour. It wasn't like the tour films you're saying, like Metallica. They're probably in, I imagine, at least a bus and planes and stuff. But Star Shaped by Blur, they're in a shitty little knackered minibus, like just looking really knackered and uncomfortable. And for us, that was what me and my friends, that's what we then aspired to.
Right, so that's kind of attainable, isn't it? The private jets, Metallica's private jet with the Metallica logo on the side. It's sort of, you can dream of that a bit, but it's not really the first step, is it? Where it's getting in a van and you can do it.
Blur was the Star Shaped by Blur is the gateway drug. It's the kind of, I'll just watch this with my friends. I'll dabble with a bit of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Just for fun. I can stop any time. Right, let's move on to your next choice. I do want to go and watch that again. I enjoyed that conversation.
It's probably on YouTube.
Oh, it's bound to be. Right, so here's choice number 2 from Mr. Jago.
Seen that road before.
Ooh, who's that?
The Rolling Stones. No.
I nearly said that.
Get Back.
So
Get Back, the documentary. That's why I chose that. Have you seen it?
I've not made it all the way through yet, and I don't know why, because
It's 9.5 hours long.
partly that.
Yeah.
I made it. It's in 3 parts, isn't it? I've seen the first part, and do you know what? If I got COVID again, or broke me legs, or did something that meant I could see and hear okay, but wouldn't be able to work for a week, which is pretty fucking unlikely because I work for myself and I have to be like actually unable to see. It's been to work. But if I had time, I would sit and watch the whole 9 hours or whatever it is, and I would enjoy every single second of it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Saying that the Blur thing we watched and kind of went, I loved it because it sort of showed you behind the scenes in not a particularly glamorous way. You see Damon Albarn's lad in that. I think they might blur it out. They were like even like filming them at urinals and stuff. And then Get Back. As a musician watching Get Back, and as somebody who, like you, has recorded in recording studios and knows that process and has been through that process fucking knows how many times, watching the Beatles go through that process is possibly one of the most rewarding experiences I've seen on a screen.
Yeah, me too.
It's absolutely incredible, and I think it's to the credit of the editor or Peter Jackson or producer, whoever decided what bits were going to be in it, because unless people are obsessive Beatles fans, some of the stuff they left in must seem quite odd or quite boring, I imagine, to some people. But as musicians, seeing the little sparks,
it's incredible.
As parts of songs come together. One of my friends summed it up best. The bit where McCartney writes Get Back.
Yeah.
He said he was at a stage in his life where songs were pouring out of him. Like in a way he probably couldn't stop if he tried, just blaze a load of songs. Just like
there's a bit in there which I find quite frustrating, which is when McCartney's just at the piano and he's just going, oh yeah, I wrote this, I got this, and he's coming out with all these ideas, a lot of them ending up on Abbey Road or Wings, and stuff like just loads of ideas, obviously just endless. And he comes out with that one, which is why I chose that, which is The Long and Winding Road. If it's been copyright stricken,
anyone on YouTube probably wouldn't have heard that. There'll just be some country music or something.
So The Long and Winding Road. He's sitting on the piano and he says, "Oh, I've got this one I've been working on," and he plays The Long and Winding Road. And the guy that's next to him, one of the crew, wants to know about the film that they're making, because they're obviously working towards this live show and they're talking about the film. And so he plays it and the guy goes, well, what are we doing about this film? We need to work out about this film. And I'm just watching it and I'm just thinking, he's just played The Long and Winding Road. So he's just played The Long and Winding Road. You've just sat there and heard him play it for the first time. And it must be, it's either that this guy just has no idea, or McCartney was just pouring them out so often that he could just come out with The Long and Winding Road and people go, oh, he's just written another song. I mean, that's the level, isn't it?
He goes again.
That's the remarkable level. You've just written one of the best songs of all time and you're playing it. I just wrote this the other night and everyone's just sort of standing around going, oh, McCartney's on the piano again. I mean, that is just phenomenal, isn't it?
Have you seen the original cut? Have you seen Let It Be?
I don't think I have. Apparently it depicted things in a very particular light, whereas this really showed everything, didn't it? Get Back really showed the playfulness of John Lennon, for instance.
My point
in the original
point I was going to make is that I watched somebody do a presentation on it, give a talk about Get Back, and in comparison to Let It Be, he said Let It Be was edited to show the breakup of the band.
Yeah.
to show all the difficulties. And like, yeah, clearly there is some of that. And I've only seen the first part of Get Back. There is some of that, but there's still a real playful loveliness between Lennon and McCartney. I mean, like really like mucking around. And there's a bit where they're having a chat with each other, and he notices there's a microphone hanging above them. So they sort of cock their head back, and they're both talking to the microphone. And it's there's so many really nice things
to consider, isn't it? That this is their job. This is what they're doing for a living. They're walking in the morning, trying to create music, and then they're leaving at night. And it's like, it's almost like people are watching it and thinking it's like a band that plays, you know, once a week or so, or just practices with their mates or whatever. And it isn't. This is their job. And actually, I think it dispels a lot of myths, I think, this film, because it shows Paul McCartney trying to be diplomatic, even though he's coming out with all of this stuff, and you know, more so than the others, really, you know, and he's trying to mediate. They've lost the manager. He's kind of taken the role on because he's the most able.
At 26 or 27, whatever age he was at.
Yeah. And it did dispel some myths about that. And Yoko's just sitting there, and I imagine some of the kind of archetype that Yoko's become was maybe the xenophobia at the time. I sort of think to myself, if she was a white woman that was sitting there next to John Lennon, I don't think that hatred would have been placed on her. She destroyed the Beatles. The film gives no evidence that she destroyed the Beatles. You know, it fell apart, and you sort of understand why from watching it. The dog's
trying to dig his way out of the room.
I'm useless with these dogs. Yeah, and also there's also, I think, going to be laid to rest the idea that Ringo Starr can't drum, because it's always been this thing, hasn't it? You know, over the years,
he's not the best drummer in the Beatles. Let alone
which was a joke anyway, wasn't it? But he does everything in that film that you want a drummer to do, and part of that is shutting the fuck up when other people are talking, which a lot of drummers, I try and be really mindful of that, because I know what it's like to be in a band when you go, oh, well, let's try that. And then the drummer goes, and just tries out their latest fill. It's like, practice separately. And then when you're in a band practice, be the drummer, serve the song, shut the fuck up.
We used to call that drum Tourette's.
Yeah.
Trying to have a conversation. I hate singing on stage with bands.
Yeah.
My favourite way to see a band is when they just rage through all the songs without even pausing for breath. So when bands do have to stop to tune up or whatever, the drummer's like, just shut up.
And it kills it, doesn't it? I understand like the warming up element, but you can get that in. You can work that in somehow. But really, you should just be able to you should really just be sitting there and waiting. Anytime anybody came out with any idea, Ringo just starts playing really quietly, delicately, and then it comes together. He brings the band together. He does exactly what you're meant to do. And I think as someone that plays drums, I've heard it from other drummers as well. I've said that they appreciate him more than when they didn't play drums, because you understand that what he's doing is, you know, his tempo, everything is what it's meant to be within that unit. He's not flash, you know. He's not a show off, but he's like Charlie Watts, you know. They just get the job done and don't fuck around, and their ego is managed, you know. Yeah. That's really important.
Yeah, he must have sat there. God, even just in the first bit I've seen, you just sort of forget he's there. You're like, Ringo's still sat at the drum kit, patiently waiting.
And then an idea will come out, and he's just there with the perfect beat. Brilliant. You know.
Right, let's move on to my what are we on? My second choice. Woo! Do you know who that is?
No.
It's a Swedish band called The Refused. Have you heard
okay.
That's off their first album. The song's called "Rather Be Dead," but I like that drum roll,
Yeah.
just powering through it.
I
But yeah,
guess I guessed wrong using Refused not so long ago. I guessed wrong. I should have tried that. I should just say Refused every time, and then it'll usually be right.
well, you were right with one of them. You're right. So that's 1996. I still can't get my head around the fact that's 1996 because that is kind of the sound of so much of the early 20s.
It's really, isn't it? Yeah,
early noughties.
Yeah.
And anyway, the documentary that they released was called "The Refused Are Fucking Dead."
Okay.
Which is a bold statement, and it was released years after they split up. And I really like those first two Refused albums. I think they're just genuinely interesting and genuinely ahead of their time. I mean, absolutely are, even the way they're recorded. But so I was like, when the documentary came out, I think 2006, I rushed out and bought it. In fact, I think I ordered it into my record shop at the time, so I got it cheap. And I can remember watching it and just like going, it's not boring, it's just miserable. They were God, I'm going to make so many people upset with this. They were a humorless, over-serious bunch of miserable interviewees.
Yeah.
And I'm not expecting them to perform like fucking clowns, but actually, in retrospect, thinking about it now, the whole documentary is about the implosion of the band. And I'd like to watch it again, actually, but instead of it being like Blur, who were in a crappy transit van, but were still playing like Glastonbury Festival, or Metallica playing Enormo Domes every night for 5 years or whatever, this Refused documentary, it's fairly shoddy camcorder style footage of them playing in basements in America to 10 or 15 people.
Right.
And really struggling. You know, like when a band goes beyond just, Blur was still getting paid. They were still getting a stipend or whatever, and they were still being driven around, and the label was still footing the bill. The Refused are fucking dead. You very much get the idea that everyone had abandoned them. Like everybody.
I mean, how much success did they have, the Refused? Because they're influential, aren't they? But I'm wondering if they're like the Stooges, where at the time they didn't really have that much success, but became regarded afterwards.
I think that's the way it is. And the documentary is well worth a watch, because I say you don't expect a chuckle face. It's not like depressing either. It's just quite. They made the documentary themselves, but it's people being asked about, hey, the relationship with all your friends broke down because you were having a miserable time, and this band that you'd poured your life into, no one seemed to give a shit. Can we sit down and talk about that and film it for a while? And you would be a bit kind of like, well, I don't really want to. I'd rather not. And the film definitely came out after people had realised how important the Refused were. So it is a bit of it's not hagiography, but it is a bit of a kind of looking back in retrospect, why didn't people get it? But it's
Have they had a reunion or anything then? It seems like the sort of thing that people would then go, well, people want to see us now, let's get back together. And
oh yeah, they're playing Brixton Academy. I went to go see Gojira a couple of years ago, it might have been pre-COVID, and Refused were headlining the next night.
Oh, okay. So it all turned out all right in the end.
It turned out all right at the end, but if you want to see a band who's not just pretending to be struggling for their art, but is actually starving, actually like not having money to buy food.
Quite interesting then, I imagine, to be able to document that, to be able to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to it. I watched at a time that I'd watched the NoFX documentary series I think it was called NoFX Backstage or something, and it was NoFX being NoFX. It was dicking around and doing dumb stuff, and they're still brilliant musicians, but I kind of think I went from that to watching the Refused Are Fucking Dead, and it was quite sobering.
Yeah,
in a way of kind of like, well, if I dreamed about being in a situation that Blur are in during Starshaped, I watched the Refused Are Fucking Dead and went, okay, well, I've kind of idolized the playing people's basements in Minneapolis at 3 a.m, and I don't think I'm giving anything away because there's no spoilers. This came out a long time ago. What they knew was going to be their last ever gig, the one that they'd literally just like, we have had enough. We've got to stop. We're just going to die of starvation. Something bad is going to happen. They had the foresight to know that and go, look,
it's not sustainable.
Life is more than this, really. So they go on stage and go into this basement knowing this is the last time we're going to perform.
Mm.
And they get like a song into it and the police shut it down.
Oh, wow.
And you see the looks on their faces, and they're trying to carry on. They're trying to like, we are past caring. You will have to arrest us. You will have to like physically incapacitate us to stop us playing. But they just stop anyway. And you look, and it's just because they're so crushed.
Yeah.
It's so kind of like
everything's against them. Yeah.
You know, this is the final straw. This confirms it. This is the end. But gladly it wasn't. So happy ending. Yay!
Yeah. So it went all right.
Right, let's go on for your next choice, which is this.
While we were getting high, someday you will find me caught beneath the landslide in a champagne supernova in the sky. Someday you will find me caught beneath the landslide in a champagne supernova, a champagne supernova.
Hey, who was that?
Was that Oasis? And the reason I chose that was because the documentary was 2016, Supersonic, which I thought, have you seen that?
I haven't, and I probably wouldn't. I'd watch if it was on. Again, I'm going to rank films as according to how ill I'd have to be to watch them.
Right, okay.
So that one, I don't like Mild Flu, and I've finished everything else I want to watch. I'd probably watch it. The only reason being is that the story has been told so many times.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things though where it's because it's well made. I feel like it's because it starts. What it's doing is it's showing I think it's a year and a half. So from the point that Oasis begin to the point they're at Nebworth, I think it's about a year and a half. And they start the documentary with them at Nebworth playing a song. And then it cuts, it sort of merges into them playing in a practice room at the very beginning. And then it goes from there. And I really like that. I thought that was a really, really nice way of doing it. The same song, and just seeing them nowhere. And I like it made me sort of like them as people more. And I think there's always been a resistance to like Oasis because of we've talked about, and I was thinking about this, we talked about separating the art from the artist. And I think what maybe I possibly find more difficult is separating the audience from the art, or the audience from the artist.
Oh, nice.
Because the 90s, right? A lot of people aren't going to, a lot of younger people aren't going to remember what the 90s were actually like. They're going to go, wow, the 90s looked amazing. But they're not going to, and in some ways it was, but they're not going to know what it was like in terms of that lad culture that existed. And me on the receiving end as a long-haired grebo getting shouted at for being a grebo all the time, the only kid in my year with long hair and a massive army jacket with huge patches all over it and all of that. And so that sort of, it almost felt like they were the enemy. It felt like if you wanted to watch something with guitars in that was a bit heavy or something like older that was rock, you had to stay up late. You had to record Noisy Mothers or a rock show or something like that. So you had to do it. You had to find a way of doing it. You couldn't just go online, obviously. You had to find a way to hear this music. And CDs were getting up to sort of 15 quid or something. So to actually absorb music was pretty difficult, in a way. And they were everywhere. And it was like, how come they're everywhere? And something I get with Oasis is, I don't think there's ever a time when there's an Oasis song and they do a chord that I wasn't expecting them to do, or there's a change that I wasn't expecting to happen. You know exactly what's coming, but there's something about the story, the way the brothers became who they became, and the relationship with their father as well, and it's sort of all of that's in there, and it sort of endeared me towards them a bit more, I think, as individuals. And that song I do like. Actually, I do like that song. There's nothing original in anything that they're doing, really. It's a bit like the Manics with, just going back to the audience and the artist thing. I remember in a pub once, they came out with a Design for Life, and they were sort of an outsiders band, really. Do you know what I mean? They were a proper sort of indie outsider type band, and they did that. And I remember being in a pub, and all these lads around the jukebox singing, "We don't talk about love, we only want to get drunk." And I just thought, the irony of that lyric, which I've always seen as an ironic lyric, I've always thought that's meant to be completely ironic, has been lost on these people, and that sort of sums up lad culture, really. Like a single-minded way of being, in that sense.
There's a song called "Pints of Guinness Make You Strong" by a band called Against Me that was written. It's written kind of a sort of damning indictment of alcoholism, and it's told as a story. And I interviewed the singer, and they said they're really disappointed that it's become like a frat song to sing.
Yeah,
it's like, well, people will take songs however they want to take them, but that's really not what I was going for. Like,
didn't Frank Zappa do was it Disco Fool or something? I'm sure he did a joke disco song, and it became like a disco hit. It became like a hit song. So
that's another brilliant topic. Like there's in the late '60s, there was an Italian pop star frustrated that Italian people were buying anything that sounded English or American, so he released this single, and it's complete gibberish, but it sounds like he's speaking English or American, and it's like his biggest hit by far.
Right, yeah.
It's like, well, there's a double-edged sword.
And if you market something a certain way, it can be a hit, can't it? So.
Oh, Oasis were, I don't know, the time was right, I guess.
They were lucky. They were very lucky.
They were lucky because the indie scene, which it might be hard for people to realise now, the indie scene was the alternative. It really was. You had to wait till, even for indie bands, you had to wait till 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock on Radio 1 to hear anything like that. There was the mainstream airwaves TV had nothing at all. So I think that the country was ready and was waiting for something that just fitted. It just ticked the boxes. Yeah. I think you're right. I think they right place, right time. And I think
I don't think any of the songs are particularly remarkable. Not really. I think they were very lucky, and they show it in the documentary. They went and auditioned. I think it was in Scotland, and Alan McGee was there, and everything just fell into place.
Yeah.
It was like nepotism in there as well, and all this. But the audience latched onto them. The audience heard something that they recognised because it sounds like a mashup of all the bands that they're influenced by.
Coca-Cola adverts. I always thought that was a stroke of, I was going to say evil genius, I don't mean that, stroke of genius that he ripped off "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," which in turn was "I'd like to teach the world to sing."
Yeah.
And people, writing a song that hundreds of millions of people know from an advert, it's going to go in. It's kind of like, well, if you did it that deliberately, that's kind of clever, but we ought to move on and play this song.
The party's over. A city skipping. It's the same hook repeating. Grows more grating with each passing second. And the walls contain a resonation. Laughter and conversation. It was fun while lasted, but now we should be going. And I hope everybody had a real good time.
Oh, I didn't like stopping that. Do you want to have a guess at who that was?
The Mook somethings.
The Mook somethings.
McDougalls.
What's that based on, or is it just you just pulled it out?
It's a bit Irish kind of sounding, isn't it?
I've never seen that before, but you're right. That's Against Me, who I mentioned a minute ago, and that's a song called "The Party's Over," which is a song that's widely accepted to be about when alternative music does start to become the mainstream, and how this neat little club that you have, which me and my friends had pre-Nirvana, suddenly becomes public property, and you lose the fact that it's your thing.
Yeah.
So that's off their first album, but the documentary they released was called the Never Going Home. And it's essentially a tour film, and it's made over a couple of US tours. In 2004 is when it comes out, and it is fucking brilliant. I mean, this band Against Me are easily my number one favoritist band ever for many reasons, and I won't go on too long about them because I've talked about them a lot on this podcast, and so's Dr. Sam. But I'm raising this, and I'm being a bit of a dick by raising this because they just signed to Fat Wreck at the time, so like. Still absolutely a tiny independent, but like an established, stable one, as it were. Whereas their first album came out on No Idea, which literally was a bunch of people cobbling together the money to put out vinyl. So some people had already thought they'd sold out by that point. But this documentary is where the world was starting to notice them. And when that was happening, major labels were starting to notice them. And the whole DVD, it's only 60 minutes long, is essentially a documentary, a document of them being courted and seduced by major labels and absolutely fucking rejecting them. Like there's some really bizarre bits in it. Like guy comes from Universal and he's trying to be like, hey, we're the future. We hear something in you that's like, oh wow, just makes the hairs on my neck. And the band is literally like, And somehow, I don't know how, because I don't think they cover it, they get him shit-faced drunk. And I don't know what it is, but the guy ends up just like face down, like, and they're, anyway, the whole point is about them not signing to a major. And about 2 years after it came out, they signed to a major. In fact, to Universal.
Oh,
no. People change, and I don't.
Well, I mean, Fat Mike's. I saw an interview with Fat Mike where he said that they've been offered sort of MTV slots for their songs and that, and they didn't want to go to that next level. They didn't want to take NoFX to that next level, really.
I find that really interesting. And NoFX, they done it. They're retired now, or they're on their last tour. They fucking did it. They slogged it out. It's not just for the punk rock belief. NoFX are quite open about the fact there's a song that goes on about there's no money under the table. No one's got their hands in our pockets. If you sign to a major, even if you're already an established band, or even if you're definitely on your way up, you're still going to get shafted in some way. That's just the way it works. And you've got really big bands, will sign their first album and get 5% of royalty share split between band members. So NoFX, they might not have done a shitload of stuff on MTV, but they would only need to sell 10,000 albums to make the same amount of money that a band on a major would need to go platinum for. So it is like, well, we get that money. I can remember when I was working out a recording contract for a band I signed, which I did as a 50-50 deal, which I think is always going to be the way to do it. Looking into other contracts and finding out how little bands made. So even bands like Oasis would have got 20 pence per CD that was selling for 15 quid, because there's so many people taking a chunk, and there's so many people that need, that sort of get their fingers into that pie. But forgetting that, so I'm not calling out Against Me for being hypocrites. I'm absolutely fucking not. I mean, the singer said, eventually we got to the stage where I realised that my family, everyone in my family would never have to go without medical care again if I took £1 million to make an album. But he just wrote a song called "The Devil Came to Gainsborough" about it, and it's such a fascinating trajectory for me, because they did 2 albums on a major, on Sire, which is Universal, produced by Butch Vig, and they're good albums. And then there was a change of management. They didn't get dropped. It just sort of naturally came to an end. And the songs that they wrote afterwards about their experience are so fucking damning of major labels. Like, shocking. There's a brilliant song called "Black Me Out," just about how, even though they went into it as positively as they could and with as much control as they could, they were still paraded like they were being controlled by a pimp, because that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound, from what I've heard about it, my limited knowledge of it, it does sound hideous, the music industry. And I mean, and God knows what it must be like now with streaming. Now there really is no money. It must be quite different. situation, I imagine.
There's a Hunter S. Thompson quote about the music industry, which I'm trying to look up, which has become really famous. Here we go. The music industry is cruel and the music industry is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. And there's also a negative side. Yeah. So that's it. Anyway, Against Me, I thoroughly recommend the documentary. In fact, I'm going to rewatch The Refused are Fucking Dead and Never Going Home, because the Against Me one, the other thing is it's loads of brilliant footage of them playing basements and stuff, and their songs are so strong, so good. So that takes us to your last entry, which
last but not least,
it did take me by surprise.
That's a great noise, isn't it?
If you can make it proper Norfolk, proper Southern. Who was that? Because I know, I fucking know.
I've set the dog off now. Bros. It's all right. It's just Bros. It's okay. Go on. Back to bed. Back to bed. Oh God, it's going to climb on me. So, hang on a minute. Now come on, look. Come on.
Jago's gone to get the dog, I assume.
Oh, blimey. Right. Bros. Just one mention of Bros and he goes nuts.
Bros. So the song, what was the name of the song? Drop the Boy.
Yeah. I actually, it's weird though, because I was looking for a Bros song, and obviously they're sort of the obvious hits. And I heard that and I was like, I really remember that.
Oh, God, so clearly.
I actually think there's a really good hook. That kind of it's like I really appreciate a good pop hook like that. Do you know what I mean?
So this was
the film is When the Screaming Stops from 2018, and it's one of the best things I've ever seen in my life.
Do you know what? Go on, carry on.
Well, because I've got a real love for kind of a rise and fall story. Do you know what I mean? And I think Fame is absolutely fascinating, and particularly in the pop world. So you get these there was Steps, I think it was Steps Reunited or Steps Reunion or something, and it was just the best thing, because they're sort of talking about Steps like it's the birth of Christ or something, and every now and then they're getting a bit tearful about things, and they're talking about their feelings, and it's just I just find that so enjoyable. There's an E17 one as well where they're trying to get back together to take on Take That. It's like when Take That got back together, E17 were like, right, we're going to take them on, and they sort of try, and they nearly get somewhere, and it keeps going wrong. And then in the final bit of the film, they're in Colchester, and they've got like backing tracks, and I think it's one of them didn't join in, and they're doing a sort of a little club in Colchester to these backing tracks of E17. So that's the sort of the final scene, and they're sort of going, oh well, it's a start, innit? You know, it'll probably be all right. And I just love that, but all of those sorts of films, I think this is the holy grail, the Bros, When the Screaming Stops, because they are David Brent. They're just, and they're so earnest, and they've got these sort of philosophies that they come out with that start off. Obviously, saying about the book, when you're being creative, you've got to be on the same page, because if you're not on the same page, then other people will get lost in the book, and it sort of trails off. It's like it starts off being philosophical and then it dribbles off somewhere.
I'm going to include the link to the video on YouTube that you sent me, because it's remarkable. And I'll be honest, I have stayed away from this documentary because I very much remember Bros at the time, and even though I was a fucking child or like a young teenager, I can remember like them. I was a paper boy, and they were always on the front of the paper. I mean, they really were a big deal, and I can remember just even at that age, disliking the way people spoke about them and thinking they're fucking human beings.
Yeah.
So when this documentary came out and everyone was talking about it, Lauren Laverne on Six News was like, just watch it. She was literally like, I'm not going to say anything, just watch it. I didn't want to watch it because I thought, I don't want to be a part of just another people making them whipping boys of stupidity.
Yeah.
That being said, I am not 100% sure that they're not fucking geniuses.
I don't think they are geniuses. No. The reason I say that, I don't think you could pretend to this extent. I think I'd be able to see through it personally. I think I'd be able to tell.
The clips I've seen, I'm not laughing at them. I'm not mocking them. I'm not being, sort of supercilious and saying I am better than them because they're saying stupid things. I'm just agog.
Yeah.
Just agog at the things they say.
The thing is, so you're watching it and sort of laughing at their expense, and because it is funny.
It's funny,
the shit they're coming out with, because they really mean it. They really mean everything they're saying. But there's a point. Actually, all these documentaries that I've chosen, there's something similar about them, which is I feel like I'm on the side of the characters involved.
Yes, that's it. That's what made the difference to me.
I want them to be okay. I want them to be successful. And the Bros one, there's something, you're watching it and they're having these arguments while they're playing that are so trivial. And I absolutely love pomposity. Do you know what I mean? When people are being really pompous and really trivial about stuff and they don't realise it, is just so unbelievably entertaining, I think. So they're doing all of that. But then they do a song about their mum. And they're sitting there and they're both, and it's like a piece they're going to do with just the two of them sitting down singing it. And they're trying to get through it. And every time they try to do it, they start crying.
Oh, man, really?
And it isn't, and it isn't false. You can tell, you can see it, genuine human emotion. And I've watched it a couple of times and I cried both times I saw it at that point, because it's there's something, when I see people being that emotional and it's genuine, the empathy in me, it is really intense. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's after that point in the film that I then really felt like, fuck, I really love these two and I want them to be all right. And I want them to get to the end of this unscathed. But you can still sort of laugh at them. And there's still that kind of Carl Pilkington thing where you're thinking, you still like them, but they're coming out with this stuff that is a distortion of what you expect. And a distortion of what you expect is kind of the basis of comedy, really. Mm. The majority of the time, it's something you don't expect, so you laugh. You're surprised by it, essentially, and that's what it is. And it's amazing. It's a hilarious film.
I think that you've struck on something really, really interesting there. So the English version of The Office compared to the American, the English one, you just go Dave Brent's a bellend. There's not really anything redeeming. Whereas the American version, you sort of after a while want Michael Scott, the Brent character, you kind of want him to be all right. Sort of like slightly worry about him, as in, kind of, mate,
yeah, but I
support around you or something.
No, but I got that from the English Office, because I think because I think he's not nasty as such.
Oh no,
completely oblivious to how he's being, how he is socially with other people and things like that. But but they are like two David Brents in Bros.
So some of the stuff
I think it's amazing.
The patience and genius of the editor and the filmmaker and the crew and everyone involved for some of the clips that you showed me is remarkable, because they just let them talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like watching a balloon with a pinprick sized puncture in it, just slowly going down.
It's just running to ground, isn't it? It just runs to ground. They really try, and it's just brilliant. And but they're so lovable, and I think it's good. I think we should celebrate individualism. People that are different. There's no one really like them. And,
I was also just pleased that they do appear they like each other, but not unquestioningly. So some of the points where one of them is trying to make a real point about something so stupid and almost so like something you'd see on the Daily Mail front cover. Just to clarify, I will say what he said just to clarify that. And he's going, do you know what the problem is? We need to start a petition because like kids can't even play conkers in this country anymore without wearing goggles. And he calls over to his brother, who's about 100 yards away, go, what do you think about conkers? His brother's clearly like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm not bothered. Yeah.
He's like, well, what do you think about conkers being banned in the UK?
Yeah.
And his brother goes, I'm all right with that. You're clearly expecting.
And none of that. But what I love is that none of that's staged. But it's absolutely
I'm
brilliant.
all right with that.
And it's better than most comedy scripts. Do you know what I mean? The toing and froing. Him saying, it's the worst problem we have in society right now with our conkers. And his brother just go, well, I don't know. And you couldn't write that, I don't think. It's
just some of the other stuff, which is, if they are, they clearly came from a working class background. And, some people like to reinforce that all the time. Whatever. That I've no judgment at all, but the things the brothers choose to talk about to try and emphasize the fact they're from a working class background is just so funny. They're talking about playing darts. Oh, when we were young,
all we had was a dart. Yeah.
All we had was a dart. And his brother goes, we didn't have a dartboard. We just used to stand out here because they're in front of, I guess they're outside of some flats where they grew up. And we'd throw it up and then see who would stand there for the longest until the dart came down. Then he goes, apart from that time, it got stuck in, and you're expecting him to say his head, and go
his ribs.
His ribs.
Yeah.
It's like, my dad just came out, just pulled it out, went, there you go, and we just went back to playing again. Yes,
the whole film is full of gripping tales like that, and you need to watch it. It's brilliant. It's really good.
I will watch it because it's sort of assured me that it's not just straight up mocking them. In a way that I've seen.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it's a hatchet job.
No, not at all. Right, so we're going to play my last choice. It's this.
Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant shit to me. Yes, he's straight out racist. The sucker was simple and plain. Motherfucking in John Wayne. Cause I'm black and I'm proud. I'm really a hype cause I'm amped. Most of my heroes don't appear in no stamp. Sample look that you look and find nothing but rednecks for 400 years if you check. Don't worry, be happy. Was a number one jam. Damn, if I said you could slap me right here. Hit it. Let's get this party started. Right on. Come on. What we got.
If anyone's listening to this and doesn't know who that is, just fucking switch off the podcast now. But just for clarity, I'm going to say that's Public Enemy with Fight the Power. And I'm talking about this. I chose this in relation to a series called Camden, which is on Apple at the moment, which is really good. It's a really interesting. It's produced by Dua Lipa. But before I get into that, I found out yesterday that the American women's water polo team is funded and sponsored by Flavor Flav.
Really?
Yeah, he found out, and he gets mocked a lot, quite unfairly, I think. He's clearly made some choices which have made his life more challenging at times, but who hasn't? But he found out that most of the Olympic team was working 2 jobs just to be able to make enough money to have enough time to rehearse. So he went, he's funding them. I mean, what a lovely thing. But yeah, this Camden, the reason I can relate that through to the Camden documentary is the Camden documentary is looking at people not just who are from Camden. So Youngblood, who I think is a really interesting sort of person, and Dua Lipa, she's family's from Kosovo, I think. Mm-hmm. But she grew up in Camden, and there's all that kind of, hey, it's a melting pot, blah, blah, blah. But what's really cool is you got people like Chuck D, who I will just listen to. If he ever did a speaking word tour, I'd just sit there kind of, with my head in my hand, just listening to, saying that he came to Camden and just kind of went, shit, this is brilliant. Because there is so much opportunity for different types of music to just sort of smash together. Whereas I'm paraphrasing, but his experience in the States is if you did hip hop, you hung out with hip hop people, you went to hip hop venues, so they came to London and just kind of went, where's the hip hop venue? And like, what do you mean the hip hop venue? There's like metal band playing here. Last night it was a folk night, and it's just one of the people who just had good stuff to say. I don't want to talk about it long because
we're not as tribal in that sense as the United States. Do you think that's down to the size of the country, that we are all just kind of shoved together? Whereas in the United States, sometimes you have to travel really far to actually experience different things.
I'm probably on very sketchy territory here, but I think apart from your teenage years, our teenage years, where being tribal about the music sort of defined who you are to a bit, which kids don't really, well, they just don't give a shit anymore. My daughter likes all kinds of music.
Yeah.
But I think in America, part of what you're into, because it's such a vast place, part of what you're into could well be influenced by the people who live around you. and
that makes sense. Yeah,
the sort of ghettoization.
that makes sense.
Something. The reason I think that, and I am saying this as a white guy from the UK, I've got no fucking experience, and that's why I said I'm on dangerous territory. But I watched the Wu-Tang Saga, which is it's a dramatization, but it's all about how Wu-Tang came about and fucking hell their lives. Jesus. I did an episode about it a long time ago, so I won't talk about it much, but you could see how just feeling strength in a common belief in and passion in a certain type of music could be an incredibly positive force. So yeah, England's a tiny place. My dad rang me the morning after the Brexit vote, and he says British people have forgotten what a stupid tiny little country we live in. And I was like, whereas America's so vast, and people naturally gravitate towards people they like. So yeah, so I wasn't really talking, so I went a bit sociological then, rather than talking about the camping documentary.
So you want freedom of speech? You got your own podcast. You can say whatever you want.
But I think out of all of these, the documentary that I think has actually made the biggest impression on me in the last 24 hours is When the Screaming Stops by Bros.
Yeah,
just I could write an essay worth of questions that it is raised, even just watching the trailer. Like, why is the drummer one? I can't remember if that's Matt or the other one. Why is he wearing a Soundgarden t-shirt?
Oh my god! And that really annoyed me because at the time when that came out, I used to live in a Soundgarden vest thing, and I'd be wearing that all the time, and I was drumming all the time. And my mate Theo, who I was in bands with, sent me a photo of Matt or whoever it is in the Soundgarden t-shirt. It's like, oh look, it's you. I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Why has he got that on?
But they can really fucking sing. I don't know. I don't think I'm mistaken, but the singer one had a fairly decent West End career in musicals and stuff.
He did I think he did Vegas. Had a residency in Vegas, I think.
Oh, blimey! Right,
Watch the documentary. You'll believe it.
We've peaked with people thinking you ripped your look off from the drummer. Drummer one in Bros.
Unbelievable.
Right, I'm going to press the big stop button. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm going to say goodbye. Jago, do you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye, farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, adieu.